lingered a little while longer on that, because we just couldn't pass it by this time of year. And then the conversation, and a little explanation here. The question and then Peter's answer. Some of you asked about this. It's kind of a disclaimer, if you please. Maybe it's not of great interest, but they spoke Koine Greek. That was the lingua franca. That is the language of the realm. It was a language that was used in business, in commerce, in government offices, and so forth. And the civilized world used Greek. But a lot of old conservative Jews probably spoke it in public, but most New Testament scholars think that people like the disciples, especially those from Galilee, pretty provincial, not very sophisticated, may have continued to speak Aramaic, the language of the Jews. But anyway, the conversation between Jesus and Peter could have been either one, but my larger point is this, that we don't need to put too fine a point or too finely parse Simon Peter's response. We've made much through the years of whether he said, I phileo, or you are my friend, or I do love you. Whether he spoke Aramaic or Greek, we're not quite sure. But the point is that he was so desperate, so eager to convince Jesus of his fealty, of his loyalty, of his friendship and affection, whatever language he spoke. Lord, believe me, I do love you. And a still larger point than that, Jesus at last believed him. He trusted him. How do we know he did? He told him to go to work for him, to feed the lambs, to feed the sheep, he reinstated him because he entrusted his work to him. So now, after having done that, what do we make of it? Where do we go from there? Jesus said, I believe you, so feed my lambs, feed my sheep, take care of my sheep. And then there's this somber note. It's a foreboding note about what will happen to him as a result. Feeding the lambs and taking care of the sheep and feeding the sheep sounds like such an innocent thing to do. But in effect, Jesus was saying to Simon Peter, if you do what I'm telling you to do, you're going to end up paying with your life. And that's exactly what he meant. When he said, when you were young, you would dress yourself, go where you wanted to, but the time is coming when other people will dress you and take you where you do not want to go and stretch out your arms. And the gospel says, by that way, in those words, Jesus was saying to Simon Peter the kind of death that he would die. He would be a martyr for the cause. And in the latter part of the 6th decade of the 1st century, there was what was called the Neronic persecution, Nero. And Christians were rounded up and blamed for the fire that devastated Rome. You remember that famous story. And so Nero blamed the Christians and rounded them up. Maybe during that time, though this is sheer speculation, it was during that time, probably, that Simon Peter and Paul were both martyred. Maybe crucified. Maybe that was their fate, the cross. Or maybe to serve as a human torch to light the Colosseum at night. In whatever way, their end was not a pleasant one. That's an interpretation, but pretty reliable, that this is what happened to them. And Jesus is saying pretty plainly to Peter, I'm calling you to feed the lambs, feed the sheep, but it will cost you your life. Really? As I confess to you a lot of times, when I'm in the midst of preparing and thinking there and sitting at my desk, and sometimes at night, in the middle of the night, I do a lot of my sermon preparation at night after when I'm about to go to sleep. It's a confession time, and as frequently something kicks in about that time as in the midst of my study. Something kicks in. This needs to be shared. I think all my life, this is what I'd like to share. I think all my life I've had to be very careful, going back to the earliest period, about what you might call knee-jerk reaction to things. Some of you have that problem as well, I imagine. Certain people and practices and behavior get your response, and you respond before you think about it. These reactions and responses come unbidden. I didn't plan to do that, but they come automatically, and I'm frankly ashamed of it many times. But part of couldn't be DNA, because I think it's part of my raising. It's part of my culture. Whether I like it or not, I'm a son of the South, whether I like it or not, with all the prejudices and biases and narrowness, meanness that come with that. And before you know it, those attitudes and behaviors kick in, and you find yourself responding to things in a pretty negative way, people and certain behavior. Remember that song from South Pacific? Woman singing, "You've got to learn to hate. You have to be carefully taught to hate." And so there are certain things that I feel negative about, and I didn't know I did. And I have to watch it and tamp those down. But let me name them. Some of the things that I feel that way. I'll give them real sophisticated names, because some of you share in this. Homophobia comes unbidden. Xenophobia, don't plan to. Male chauvinism, attitude toward aggressive women. Racial prejudice, directed toward non-whites. These are things that come into my mind, and I'm feeling a negative thought before I even had a plan to do that. And sexual orientation, aggressive women, other races, other nationalities that we consider inferior to us. Do you have these? Before you know it, you're thinking negatively about certain people, certain behavior, certain ways of life. About when you're 90 years old, and I'm nearly 91. I got to think about it the other day. I'm on the downside of 90. I'm nearly 91. You excuse yourself for certain things, and maybe we excuse ourselves a little too easily. When we have negative thoughts and ugly thoughts about people who are different from us, and we get to thinking they're dangerous and they will do us harm, but then suddenly it dawns on us, wait, these are not the people that do us harm. They are not the ones that are set to hurt us and do us harm. Quite the opposite. The hostility and the violence even come from another source aimed toward these people, not us. Malice and anger and opposition comes from another source, from those who approve of our prejudices. They approve of our prejudices and our biases, even our hatred. And when we care for those people that I mentioned, when we open our hearts to those people, when we welcome them, then they don't like us. You're bad folks for welcoming them into your lives. When we open our lives and welcome the despised and the rejected, when we welcome those who have been passed over and regarded as strange, as unacceptable, that's when we encounter anger, opposition, even hatred. That's when it happens. You mean you accept those folks, those weirdos? These are the same kind of people that admire Philip in the book of Acts, in the 6th chapter of Acts, witnessing to and befriending the sexually mutilated Ethiopian eunuch. Sexually mutilated. He was an outsider. He was an outcast. And so they regard Philip as being a good person who would preach the gospel to him. But today, it'd be another matter. I've seen reactions to that, responses to that kind of behavior And it is nothing short of hatred for folks who accept the likes of the Ethiopian eunuch. It's hatred for those who accept them. And there are people today who admire Philip in the book of Acts, but they say, leave him in the book of Acts. Don't bring him up to date now. Now, I haven't left Jesus and Peter. I've just kind of wandered off there, but I'm coming back to the conversation between Jesus and Peter. This kind of behavior, welcoming the unacceptable and the weirdos and the strange ones, got Jesus killed. Did you know that? And now he turns to Simon Peter, and if you do what I did and what I'm calling you to do, you may end up the same way. He'd heard his Lord's words, follow me, and follow him he did. In all likelihood, all the way to the cross. It got Jesus killed. Most likely got Simon Peter killed as well. And the figures do speak of that. Same thing will happen to you. What keeps us safe, folks? And what gets us in trouble? You know, when I made a note here that I wanted to remind you of, that I'm sure that it was fine and you feel good about the governor of Georgia and the governor of Alabama, the law that was passed that there can be no abortion after you detect the fetal heartbeat. You say that's good. That upholds family values, moral values. Fine. But what about prenatal care? What about postnatal care? What about infant health care? What about child care for the working mother who now has another mouth to feed? You see, our business ends beyond these church walls. That's not our business, what happens beyond these church walls, or what happens outside of the womb. Once they're here, they're somebody else's business. What about the thousands of children who live raised in absolute poverty, squalor, even incest and abuse? They got here. They went full term, and they were born. But what happened now? Does our concern for them end when they're born? Oh, but that's meddling, isn't it? Oh, boy, that's meddling. We're not supposed to care about that. Anything that happens outside these walls, not our business. You know what got Jesus crucified? Do you know? A pretty good case could be made that he was crucified because he meddled. He meddled in things not his business. Do you know when a preacher or a church are accused of getting involved in politics? It's when they say things that make people uncomfortable. Doesn't matter what it is. So, our concern should be deep and abiding. But they have to do with the things that Jesus called us to do. What are they? Feed the lambs, care for the sheep, and that sounds so peaceful, and so tranquil, so pastoral, so bucolic. That's not going to get you in trouble, is it? No. But it's actually dangerous. It's life-threatening, the way Jesus did it. And that's what he's calling Simon Peter to do, the kinds of things that he did. What are they? For instance, passing by the seat of custom of the booth where they collected taxes, where there was a guy sitting named Levi, a tax collector. And Jesus said, get up and go with me. And Levi got up and went with him and threw a party for Jesus. A dinner party for Jesus. And you know who came? Other tax collectors and sinners and prostitutes, people of the world, the lawbreakers. And they were horrified at that, and they said, look at your Lord, he's having dinner with these kind of people. It got him in trouble. And they began to look out for Jesus, the kind of person that would welcome a woman who came in off the street, a sinful woman, a loose-living woman who came in off the street and anointed his feet and touched him lovingly. And they looked at each other horrified if he'd known what kind of woman this is. When they came to him and asked him if it was lawful to pay taxes or not, and he looked at the coin and said, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar and to God the things that are God's. Yeah, pay your taxes, but that's all. Caesar doesn't own you. Caesar is not your God. And when he went into the temple and cleansed it, you know what he did when he cleansed the temple? He took care of their cash cow. They made a huge amount of money, the exchangers of money. They made a lot of money, and they made a lot of money selling animals for sacrifice. And so Jesus threatened their cash cow. You want to know when a church gets into trouble? When they do that. When they call the rich and the powerful to task and say you're abusing people by your practices. No, you're not supposed to do that. That's meddling. And when he called the scribes and the Pharisees to him and engaged in excoriating the scribes and the Pharisees for their hypocrisy, because they paid attention to the trivial matters and overlooked love and justice and mercy. If he just wandered around out there on the hillside as a country preacher, gathering a few folks around him and telling parables, he never would have gotten into trouble. But no, he wouldn't do that. Jesus, you had to stick your nose in other people's business. Meddling in other people's business. You were a troublemaker. And they fixed you. They crucified you. Why, that's why his family came for him when he was in the house teaching. And they came and they said, send in and bring him out. We want to take him home. He's lost his mind. The kind of thing he's doing and the kind of thing he's saying will get him killed. We got to take him home and protect him. But Jesus would not do that. Same thing happened to him that later happened to Simon Peter. By the time these words became part of the fourth gospel, do you realize that? By the time these words became part of the fourth gospel, the time had long passed that Simon Peter had died. The words tell us that he became a martyr about 66 or 7, and this was written about toward the end of the first century. It had long since passed that Simon Peter had been killed for the Lord. It was said of those early Christians, we talked about it in our Bible study this morning. It applies to them. I wonder if it applies to us in any sense. It was said of these early Christians, these troublemakers have come here also. Troublemakers. We're preaching the gospel. Oh, no, you're not. You're meddling. These men who have turned the world upside down. And Peter was likely caught up in that. And like his Lord, he spoke truth to power. Do you know what that means when you speak truth to power? You hold the call of God and the kind of commitment that he calls us to and the kind of treatment of other people that he calls us to. You hold that up against the practices of the rich and powerful, and it'll get you into trouble. You try it. It's only when we talk about the inequity of our justice system, for instance, that they get ready to burn a cross in our front yard. If we don't say anything about it, they'll leave us alone. If we play it safe, we'll get through life all right. But feeding the lambs, caring for the sheep, cuts a broad swath It's more than feeding the lambs and feeding the sheep. The church and the meddling preacher talking about things not our business. Oh, what is our business? What is our business? It's the care of souls. And that means the care of people. People are our business. And they're hurts of 1,000 kinds. That's our business. People. Two things. Our business is people. And it costs to take care of our business. You can count on it. People are our business. And it will cost to take care of our business. And all right. Oh, wait. Almost forgot about him. Peter turned around and said, fine, Lord, what you've called me to do, and I guess I better get ready to do it. But he turned around, and there was this young disciple whom Jesus loved, his pet, they probably called him. John, he may have been. And Simon Peter turned around and said, what about him? What about him, Lord? The beloved disciple standing there. You know what Jesus said is about as blunt as anything he ever said. Simon Peter, if I desire to keep him alive till I come again, that's not your business. You follow me. The Lord speaking to other people and working out in their lives what his call is for them is not our business. It really isn't. But our business is to listen to what he has to say to us. And he calls us to care for people of all kinds. Not just before they get here, but when they're here full term, ready to live in our world. We care for them. People of all kinds are our business, and it will cost us to do our business. What about these other folks? That's not our business. You follow me. You and you and you and you. Follow me. Take care of your business. What's he saying to Joe over yonder? John, what? That's not your business. Follow me. Follow me. Pray with me.